Welcome back. Thank you for joining us this week. I'm really excited for this episode where I get to talk to Ginn from the Latch Link. She's a friend of mine now. We've known each other for more than a year. I met her in Nashville in person just recently in January. So when we got back from the trip, I was like, let's get you on. So I think we recorded this one the end of February on my birthday. Well, birthday this year. I have a leap year. So February 28th, we recorded this. And I'm just so like, whoa, where are we? June? So I'm really excited to have this one out. It's always so fun to go back and see all the conversations that I've had, even if they're months ago. And I get to re-listen to these amazing conversations where I learned a lot, I shared a lot. And these are the kind of conversations we want to have, right? With friends about the topics that we love. Hello, this is why I made a podcast, and to educate myself and others as well, right? And sometimes we got to bring on those experts. So, piggybacking off of last week, which first of all, I just want to say thank you to, if you listened to the podcast last week, I went in a bit on my story with regards to losing the hospital job. I don't even want to say losing, let's be honest, but I don't have that job anymore. I resigned, but I feel like they were going to fire me anyways. So as I was sitting on the couch I wasn't sitting on the couch. I'm working hard. I'm my friend's nurse. But for them, I was sitting on the bench, let's say, getting paid for 6 weeks while they were figuring out what they were going to do. And I was working hard, and I'm like, all right, well, let me know. But honestly, as each day passed, I was like, there's no way. There's no way I can go back to this hospital without having a big target on my back. So if anything goes wrong in that birth room, they're going to point at me. I'm going to be the easy scapegoat, and I can't risk my license. And I certainly don't want to risk my reputation with them saying that I go against doctor's orders and whatever lies or twists of the truth they did. There's no way, because that's just not how I roll. I do follow doctor's orders, but I also make sure that the patient is informed correctly, that we are getting their consent, and that their preferences and their voices are being heard. And too many times I can see them blatantly ignoring them or completely bypassing any type of education on risks or management or what interventions they're going to do or their plan of care. And I just don't do it that way, and I know it works. I know my patients, the ones that I get to be a part of, are going to be safe, and I'm going to give them the best possible care I can. And they're going to get that. So I'm a great nurse. I know it. I can back myself up. There's nothing in the charting. They've never told me anything I actually did wrong. I've requested, because if I did do something wrong, or even if I said something really wrong or disrespectful, maybe my tone, I'm only human, right? Was it a facial grimace? Possibly. Can you let me know so that I can grow as a person and as a nurse and as a coworker? I want to improve. But I got nothing so far. So we'll see. One of the doctors and you got a hold of that episode, give me a call. Okay. I'm not your enemy. We can talk. Let's find out what the issue really is and try to resolve it like grown adults. Maybe I'll send myself an email. Maybe I'll send them an email. I don't know. What should I do, you guys? Send me a message. They're doctors in my community, and I have, now that I'm a doula and I'm a coach virtually, I have clients that are coming to me that are going to be giving birth in this hospital, and some of them may have these doctors. So how can we work together, right? Doctors, please don't, put these doulas in a box or put me as a woman. Just we have to be cohesive. We're working for this woman and her birth and her baby. So how can we do that appropriately? If she has chosen me to be her advocate and her doula, then how can we work together? And remember, I'm coach on communication. So I gotta live by that that code of cuts. It's hard, but I'm going to. Anyways, I just want to say thank you to anyone that's reached out to show their support for me in my community, online, on social media, all of it. I just appreciate you guys a lot. Please share the episode with others, especially if they're nurses or doulas or doctors or they're pregnant, and share the show. I just really appreciate it. I love being here. I love doing this, and I want to continue. So let's continue. Let's get into our interview today with Amber. Now, we have a really good conversation. It's a lot of back and forth on advocacy and what does that mean? What does it mean when it comes to breastfeeding? So, point taken, you're going to be the leader in your birth. So as a leader, how are you going to set yourself up to be as effective with breastfeeding as possible? Okay. We all need that kind of guidance. So let's get into it with Amber Ginn. Welcome to the BirthLink podcast, presented by My Friend's a Nurse. I'm your host, Colette McCullicher, a high-risk labor and delivery nurse right here in sunny California. I'm also an OB certified specialist, birth educator, lactation expert, and mother of 2 beautiful daughters. I am passionate about guiding you through the miraculous journey of pregnancy and childbirth, using evidence and history and asking the reason why. I have some incredible medical friends and colleagues, and we're all here to help you navigate this often overwhelming birthing hospital system in the United States. My goal is to gain trust in birth, improve this system, and provide some valuable insights. Let's make this journey a little less daunting and a lot more joyful. Let's get into it. Hi, Amber. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm good. I'm so glad that you're able to come on to the BirthLink podcast today. And it was so fun getting to know you in person in Nashville. We had a blast, especially hitting the town and getting on that bull. And my gosh, it was so fun. But today we are going to get into all things birth and lactation and advocacy for women and what that means to us and for them in the birth scene, in the setting. So first, please tell us more about yourself and what your story is, how you got into lactation consulting and just the birth world in general.
Yeah, so first of all, thank you so much for having me, and it was super fun getting to hang out with you in Nashville. So my name is Amber Ginn. I'm a board certified lactation consultant. I've been in private practice for over 5 years, but I've worked in the perinatal birth space for almost a decade. So long story short, I had my first child 2 weeks before I turned 16. As you would assume, it was a really stressful, traumatic experience. I had these lovely plans for what I wanted to do during my birth, and literally everyone I told about them was like, oh, you're insane. That's never going to happen. You're going to need an epidural. It's going to be the worst thing ever. And so I was already pretty downtrodden from the beginning, but I definitely ended up having a really intervention laden birth. It wasn't very empowering. And I had an emergency C-section, the whole thing. And so I had my little baby there, and I was like, okay, if I can just manage to breastfeed him, I'll feel like I did one thing right. And it was going really sideways in the beginning. And thankfully, I managed to get in touch with I think it was just a breastfeeding peer counselor through WIC, and she was able to get me a pump and show me how to get a good latch. And I was able to pump for him and haul this big old school pump back and forth to school. I was in high school, still went to school the whole time, every single day. And I was able to pump for him for the first year of his life. And it made me feel like I was able to do something right in a time when I was screwing everything up. And so it had such a big impact on me that I was like, I want to be able to, if I can just give a fraction of what I experienced to other people, it would be such meaningful work. And so that's why I got into lactation care. I was a doula at first, then I was a childbirth educator, and then I did breastfeeding counselor, and then became an IBCLC. So I really love it. And I run my practice, the Latch Link. It's fully virtual, and I work with moms all over the US. And I absolutely adore getting to support moms in a way that was so meaningful for me in my own motherhood journey.
That's amazing. I mean, talk about taking your own story and journey and then changing the narrative and being able to empower other women with the knowledge that you gain. That's so cool. And I always say, I'm like, the birth workers that I talk to, whether they're nurses or lactation consultants or doulas, a lot of them, they stem from their own stories and their own birth, journeys, and that they just wanted to take what they learned and pass it along, because it is crazy. It is a crazy experience to give birth and have a baby, especially here in maybe the hospital setting, and you're like, whoa, like, no, no, no. We need to band together as a community and learn from each other. And then we almost become advocates for them, right? At least the nurses, like, and of course, doulas and lactation consultants, our job, our main priority is to advocate for these patients, for our clients, for these women and for their families, right? So it starts with learning what that even looks like. And let's get into it a little bit. First, I want to talk about there's a skill to advocating for yourself, right? I talk about it a lot in my workshops, and a lot of it's communication and leadership skills that go into speaking up for yourself, right? And, what would be the benefits? Because a lot of the times, let's talk about the benefits of it, because a lot of times I see a lot of women, you probably do too, that they just want to trust their doctor. They want to go to their prenatal appointments and hear that the baby's okay and that the doctor will tell me what I need to know. So we're fine, right? And they don't really speak up or ask questions. And then they get to the birth room and they're like, okay, I'm just going to just do whatever's best for the baby, and okay, and that's as far as it goes. They put a lot of it into our hands as nurses, and they only really start speaking up or feeling it when it's too late, when things have already gone wrong. And then that's probably when you see them the most as a lactation consultant. So what can we do? Like, moms listening, let's start chatting about, like, during pregnancy, what can we start doing to start advocating for ourselves? Maybe for birth, but also, since you're a lactation consultant, for breastfeeding too. Let's start chatting about it. So what can we do during pregnancy, would you say?
Yeah, I would say definitely having the dynamic between you and your care team, whether it's your obstetrician, lactation consultant, nurse, doula, having that dynamic very clearly defined and understanding that ultimately, like, we all work for the mom. Like, it's not the other way around. It's not like we're on this same playing field. Like, they're the decision maker and we work for them. So, them understanding that power dynamic, I think, is really, really important. In my practice, I'm really big on, like, you're the boss, like, the mom is the boss. And there's a lot of, like, empowerment that comes from framing it that way. But there's also, we have to understand that any of the consequences to the choices we make we're responsible for them. If we, like, what am I trying to say? If we just de facto trust what the doctor says, then that can be good. And then we feel good. But then if it's a bad outcome, then we're the ones responsible for it. So at the end of the day, we have to understand that we are the boss and we're also responsible for outcomes. So it's super duper important that we understand the dynamic between us and our care team, and that at the end of the day, all of the consequences of our choices, we're going to have to deal with those, whether they're good or bad.
Exactly. When I first became a labor and delivery nurse, in the interview, the director of the unit said, just so you know, this is the most highly litigated unit in the hospital. So you better be aware. Like, she was scaring me, like, and this is why. It's because their patients are coming in not as educated, not as prepared, and giving all of the responsibility almost of making those decisions to the doctors, to the nurses, and to the hospitals. That's why we're so careful with our policies and with what we allow, because we have to make decisions based on, like, an umbrella of, like, putting everyone in this umbrella, right? Even though each individual person are coming with their own experiences and their own history and their own preferences. We can't know that before they come. So we have to learn all of these policies and rules, and whether it's for medication or C-sections or whatever we're doing, because of liability, because we are given so much of the responsibility of making sure that they're okay. And because we're going to get sued if something happens,
Right.
they're like, hey, you were responsible for those decisions, right? So now we're suing you because this didn't turn out right, and we got hurt in some way, or my baby got hurt in some way, right? So we are given a lot of responsibility as a healthcare team, but who is going home with the consequences? Like, you are. The mom and the parents and the family are the ones that are going to actually, at the end, no matter if you go to court and you sue them and they are taking some responsibility for it, at the end of the day, the biggest, like, loss is going to be for you as the mother and as the parents. So whether you like it or not, you are going to have to take some responsibility for your healthcare and your health. So that means being prepared, being educated, and like you said, building a team and really understanding that you are the boss. I love that you say that with your clients because it's so true. Like your doctor, I always say, is just a very well educated and experienced medical advisor, right? And then when push comes to shove, when you need them to step in and do a cervical procedure or intervention, they are qualified to do that when necessary. But you are the one that is going to be asking the questions and making sure you understand and agreeing to those interventions, unless it's like a life-saving emergency, right? So I
For
love that.
sure.
Yes, build a team around you. And that means asking questions, right? Asking the right questions and knowing what options you have always, including a lactation consultant, which you can get ahead of time. You can start talking to a doula and a lactation consultant ahead of time and get those questions and making sure that your doctor is aware that you have a lactation consultant, that breastfeeding is important to you, right? So asking them, what
Definitely.
can I do? So what questions would you as a lactation consultant love if your clients would start asking their provider? Like, what questions can we start giving our team to make sure that we succeed in breastfeeding or a birth that we really, really want?
Yeah, so I definitely would say, in terms of breastfeeding specifically, finding out about the hospital that you're going to deliver at. Some hospitals are breastfeeding friendly, and I have had a myriad of experiences through my clients with breastfeeding friendly hospitals, baby friendly hospitals, excuse me. And some of them have had really great experiences, and others have had really like borderline traumatic experiences where doctors wouldn't let them use formula, and it was a whole thing. So I would definitely do a lot of research about the hospital you're delivering at, their policies, et cetera, just like as a baseline for understanding the facility that you're going to be giving birth at. Beyond that, I would talk to your doctor and ask them about their particular protocols and preferences when it comes to how baby is looked after they're born. Are they able to do exams while maintaining skin to skin? What sort of an emergency would warrant taking baby away from you? How long are you usually kept together? Just those things that are going to affect your breastfeeding experience, because the more one-on-one skin to skin contact we can have prolonged undisturbed with our baby immediately after birth, the better our outcome is going to be for breastfeeding. Of course, we can navigate and work on any situation where that doesn't happen. That's not like the end of the world, but in the optimal setting, we would want to have uninterrupted skin to skin rooming in with our baby for ever until they get their first latch, and as long as you want to have them on you, pretty much.
Right. And then that's great. And then we get that into your birth plan and all the information that you gather from your lactation consultant and your doula and your doctor, you can put on there and communicate it with your nurse. And then your whole team is on the same page so that you can facilitate that. Yeah, get it.
For sure.
Yeah, that's great. So, like, the choices that you make in pregnancy really do affect your birth, and then they go right into postpartum and breastfeeding and the newborn stage and your postpartum stage. They're all interconnected. So, it really begins in pregnancy, maybe even before pregnancy. I love that. So we touched on like birth choices and outcomes and how they impact breastfeeding a little bit. I love that you mentioned that staying in the room and staying with your baby as much as possible. Sometimes you can't, but then, okay, baby's in NICU. What can I do to get my baby some breast milk and get skin to skin? Like, I need to get in the room right away. You need to advocate for yourself to do that sometimes, right? Nurses have a list of things that they need to do to you and maybe the baby. And for them, sometimes that's the priority over you getting your skin to skin and being with your baby. So you have to say, or your partner has to be like, no, no, no. You can take my blood pressure, but I'm going to go see my baby. How soon? What's going on? You have to speak up, and you have to speak up often sometimes. It's sad, but when you can advocate for yourself and then have a team behind you, if you know the right people to ask, if you have like me or you or someone on the back line like telling you what questions, or you have a doula, then that's going to help you advocate for yourself as well. It's really hard to do it by yourself. You really need a support team. So, and like with your first baby, I was young too. I was 19 when I had my baby. So that's even harder. You're like, how am I possibly going to know more than the doctors or the nurses, right? So I'll just go
Right.
along with them. And it's not until after you're like, wait a minute. They didn't know as much. They didn't know about much as like of what I wanted or needed. And maybe I didn't know what I needed either, right? So a lot of it is finding
Right.
out, what do I even want or need?
Oh yeah. And why do you want it? I think I have that
Why?
discussion with all my prenatals. It's like, what are your breastfeeding goals and why? And then and why a few more times before. Because yeah, otherwise you have a lot of people out here thinking they want something and they don't even fully understand. And it's really difficult to advocate for yourself for something, especially in a stressful situation where you are facing some backlash if you don't even really know why it is you want it in the first place.
100%. And I saw it on TikTok and it looked cool is not the reason why. Like we got to dig down like why you want this, and then that's going to motivate you to really step up and ask for it. And when you're speaking about it, when you're talking to your partner about it, and then they understand your why, it's going to make it so much easier to feel empowered and listened to, like you're going to feel heard. Because if you're just like, oh, I don't
Definitely.
know, I thought, it was a good idea, they're going to walk all over you. You better come in strong, girl, strong. And again, if you prepare and you talk to your partner about it ahead of time, then you don't always have to be the one speaking up. If you're really tired, if you're just laying there exhausted after a crazy birth, if you have medication, if you're on pain meds or, whatever it could be, then you're not always going to be able to speak up. So your partner needs to get in and start speaking up for you because they know how much you want something or why it's important. It's amazing. So then how can we use our voice? I'm just taking a question that we want to talk about. I want to make sure we get to it. How can we use our voice to then shape that birth and breastfeeding experience? We know we want to feel empowered. We know we want to feel confident. So what are some tips to speaking up, to building that team that you would give your clients?
Yeah, so I would definitely say just talking with your partner, deciding what sort of a setting you're going to have, what your goals are for your birth, and then working backward from there and making sure that you've communicated what you're hoping to get with your nurse. If you know, like when you get to the hospital, you know what nurse you're going to have, communicating with them your birth plan. But especially when you're going to your prenatal appointments, I would definitely bring that birth plan and talk to your doctor about it, because I've had clients who brought their birth plan in and their doctors literally like scoff at them. And like, that's a pretty big red flag. So you always want to know like what sort of thing you're going to be walking into. And sometimes we go on a trip and we go in labor and it's a whole new hospital and things happen. We don't always get, the perfect situation, but definitely asking just how do they feel about you advocating for yourself. Like that's the first like litmus test of how things are going to go. And then kind of going from there really. Because if they give you a hard time about being like, hey, I'm thinking about doing delayed cord clamping, and they're like, ugh, like what do you even know about this? We want to really know that from the beginning. It's really helpful to have an idea of how they take what some doctors I think perceive as criticism when you have your own ideas and you advocate for yourself.
Yeah, like how dare you come in here and tell me how to do my job? Like, we're going to take care of you. Just shut up. It's true. And I tell parents and moms especially, to the sooner you can do it, because you said like it's a red flag if you take a birth plan or even say like, hey, I'm starting to create a birth plan and I'd love to start asking you questions. And I don't care if it's you're 8 weeks pregnant. Like, I don't care if you're not even pregnant yet and you found your OB and you're like, hey, I want to talk. This is the time. The earlier, the better, because it's so much easier to change your team and get a new provider the sooner you do it. Though
Right.
I have seen women in the middle of labor in the hospital fire their doctor for countless reasons. I had the last one I did, she fired because she didn't like the way the doctor spoke to the nurse. And the nurses were just like, they're like, hell yeah. Because sometimes you don't know how your doctor is going to be speaking or their actual bedside manner until the time of. If they're going to be
Right.
rushing you, if
For
they are
sure.
prioritizing their way or their highway. So you really want to read between the lines during your prenatal appointments and ask questions. Get to know who this person is. That person, that obstetrician or midwife or physician, because sometimes you'll have a family practice doctor, who are they as a person, right? Are they kind of in a rush? Or are they very A-type, like this is the way we do things, and very structured? Are they facing you when they speak? Do they have children? Who are they? Like, get to know them and make sure they get to know you, right? Make sure you have to, unfortunately, and this is hard for those introverts, so sometimes it's a good idea to bring in your friend that knows you and can ask those questions and kind of facilitate a conversation, or maybe a great doula who will help attend these prenatal appointments with you, or your partner, of course. You have to figure out your weaknesses but still get it done. Like, just because you're shy and you don't want to make waves doesn't mean that you don't want to. You wouldn't hire a nanny, right? Without you're not going to hire someone to come into your house and take care of your baby without sitting and getting to know them a little bit.
Right.
At least a little bit, I hope. You're like, the "are you available?" It shouldn't end there.
Right, I know. Yeah, you definitely can interview OBs, it's just like you're saying with a nanny. I mean, hell, I feel like a lot of women will go through more trouble like picking out like a massage therapist or like a nail tech or something than sometimes they do with obstetricians. They just show up and they're like, all right, good enough. Like, you have the option. You can go and see lots of them.
For real, girl. Like, they put more time into who's going to do their hair than who's going to deliver their baby. And no, 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 no. I really value the women that are, ask a lot of questions and they're very picky. And yeah, for nurses and doctors, we're like, ugh, because we're rushed, we're short staffed, we want to
Right.
move on. We don't have a lot of time to explain things. Sorry, who cares? Ask those questions,
For sure. Yeah.
And that goes in postpartum. So when it's time to breastfeed, understand that those postpartum nurses, when they come in, they aren't always as educated as they may appear when it comes to lactation and breastfeeding. They are going to be going a lot by what the policies are in the hospital, and the policies are set. Remember that umbrella statement. So like, those policies are just to make sure that nobody falls between the cracks. So we are giving care to the same way to all the people. We're not letting some fall between the cracks, but that doesn't mean that you have to agree to it, right? So just understand that, like, you can request a lactation consultant at the hospital, or at least, like you said, find out what the hospital can provide for you. Go in prepared and understand that you're going to bring in your own help, bring a lactation consultant with you, or you're going to request one from the hospital. But understand, like, you kind of need to interview your nurses as well and find out what kind of experience they have before you just take their tips and tricks as gold. Right.
Yeah, definitely. And especially with lactation, like if you have certain insurances, you get like unlimited visits with us. So when you're in the hospital, they bill separately. They bill, usually the rendering provider is the doctor, so it doesn't really count. But when you see us outside of the hospital, you can see as many as you want. And same thing, interview us. Like if you talk to one of us and you're like, ugh, she seems way too into like only feeding at the breast, or this one seems way too like pushy about bottles, hire and fire us too. Like find the right people who work for you. It doesn't just go for doctors and nurses. I hope moms understand. Yeah, you only work with people that you feel aligned with, because you're not going to have good outcomes. It's such a vulnerable state. And our bodies, our hormones, I could go off on that for a while. But yeah, if you're feeling stressed when you're working with a practitioner, like, you are not going to have a good time with breastfeeding, and your baby's totally going to pick up on it.
That's true. That's a good final point too, is like, the way you can advocate for yourself is find out what's available by looking through to your insurance and seeing what they provide, and interview and get a lactation consultant before there's a problem, before you're in postpartum stressed out because your baby's not latching and feeding, and you have doctors and nurses down your throat about, oh, you have to do this, or formula, you can get, learn what you can do in your options before those hormones are raging, and you're
Yes.
exhausted and you now have a newborn, and that's not the time to start interviewing a lactation consultant.
For sure. Yeah, definitely.
Do a lot of moms come in, do you meet them a lot of times pregnant, or are they mostly postpartum?
I would say maybe like 20% of my clients I meet prenatally and the rest postpartum. But for the ones that I see postpartum, I would say like 90% of them, I would say 90% for sure, would be having a better time had they met with a lactation consultant during their pregnancy. Because a lot of the problems are just little things that if you don't catch them, they kind of, unravel everything a little bit.
Totally. Oh, that's great. And so you find that 20% of the pregnant women, you can follow them along and they do better then?
Oh yeah, yeah, they do great. And it's so beautiful. Like you can tell just the way their language is. Like they're like, yeah, my doctor said this, but I already knew this thing. So I just, didn't even worry about it. So they're just in so much of a better space. Yeah. They don't get tripped up about suggestions or weight stuff, or they're just so much more empowered and calm, which is what we all really want as moms. It's just to be chill, I think, not be too frazzled.
Totally. And your partner too. If you start stressing, they'll stress and then you'll stress more.
Oh yeah.
And all of a sudden you're giving formula because you're like, I'm just too tired to even deal with this.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
Perfect. And you work virtually, you said. So it's not like you
I
have to
do.
find one that lives in your area too. That's huge. And I love that.
Definitely.
I know a few IBCLCs that work virtually, and they have said that it's actually really empowering for the women because they have to be hands-on on their own and learn
Right.
how to take care of their
Exactly.
own body. It's not like the woman's going to be there fondling you
Right.
and getting the latch for you. You have to learn how to do it
Right.
yourself, which is really empowering. I love that. So you take
Yeah,
clients
that's
just
why I've
virtually.
exclusively virtually. Yeah, I did. So I've been, like I said, over 5 years in private practice as an IBCLC and did breastfeeding stuff before that. But yeah, I switched over to virtual because I noticed that, yeah, a lot of women, you would go to see them and they would want you to like just grab on them and do all this stuff. And it's like, that's all well and good. And we can get like a spectacular latch, but then I leave. And so it doesn't stick. So, and I'm not really a big hands-on person. You have to know that stuff for yourself. Cause in the middle of the night when your baby's wiggling all over the place and it's dark, like you're not going to have another lady there to grab all over you. So for me, yeah, and the way I practice virtual works really, really well. And like I was saying about hormones, we can get videos of you nursing your baby in your depends, both boobies out, like from your partner recording it. And that's going to give me such a better look at what the latch looks like, how baby's doing, what you look like, than if you had to get dressed and clean up your living room real fast because a stranger's coming over, or God forbid, drag a baby to another appointment. So yeah, I love providing care virtually.
Amazing. And so your company is called the Latch Link.
Correct.
You can find
Yes.
Amber at thelatchlink.com, and her social is at Amber, the IBCLC. That's the gold standard. IBCLC is for lactation consultants. And Amber, can you just leave, and I'll leave that information in the show notes as well. Can you just leave us with one last tip or what you would want our moms, our listeners to know today and leave with?
Yeah, just remember that you get to decide what works for you, and there's no one right way to breastfeed. There's only like the empowered way. That's the right way. So ask questions, make choices that make you feel good, and don't feel like you have to do what anyone tells you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Amber. And it was so good seeing you again. I can't wait to hang out again soon.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. And thank you again to Amber at the Latch Link. Check out the show notes for all her links to get ahead in your breastfeeding game. I want to make sure that you have all the resources at your fingertips, whether it's virtually or in person, and just share it. Share. Okay. If you know someone that's pregnant, or share away. Okay. This is when it starts, during pregnancy or even before. I'll see you guys next week. Bye. Thank you for listening to My Friends and Nurse presents the Birthling Podcast. We hope you enjoyed today's episode and found it valuable. Before we go, a quick reminder. The information shared on this podcast is for educational purposes only and should not be considered medical advice. Always consult with your healthcare provider for any medical concerns or questions. If you enjoyed the episode, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your friends. Your support helps us reach more people and continue to bring you great content. Until next time, stay healthy and stay informed.